Substance is an absolutely grotesque body horror flick that just hit theaters. It's directed by Coralie Farge, and it stars Dennis Quaid as a producer of a hit aerobic show, and we'll get to more of him in a minute. It also stars Demi Moore as Elizabeth Sparkle, the star of that hit aerobic show, and it stars Margaret Qualley as Sue, a younger, better version of Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle. And where the movie opens is Elizabeth Sparkle is given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And you see this beautiful star get created, but then you see from an aerial viewpoint the star start to crack, people drop food on it, a homeless guy full on just stops over the star at one point, and that's a symbol of Elizabeth Sparkle. She's this young, attractive girl. She has an aerobics show. She brings in tons of viewers, but as the movie opens on her 50th birthday, you see her absolutely pig producer, played by Dennis Quaid, start to phase her out. He wants to find someone younger, someone more attractive, someone hotter. He is completely on board with pushing out Elizabeth Sparkle and not thinking twice about it. And eventually gets his wish, pushes her out of the position, and starts looking for a younger, better actress. And around that time, Elizabeth is offered something known only as the Substance, and the Substance promises to create a younger, better version of herself. And so without really looking into it too much, she jumps into it because she doesn't want to lose that attractive quality about herself. She doesn't want to lose that fame. And so she takes this stuff known only as the Substance, and the Substance does what it claims it can do. It creates a younger, better version of herself, but it does it by pushing out another body from Elizabeth Sparkle. It's a really gross scene, but it's really effectively done. And this new, better, younger version of her is known as Sue. But of course, there is a little bit of a catch. It doesn't just create a younger, better version of yourself. You are still in existence with this thing. And while it's trying to tell you, hey, you are one, but you do have to live 7 separate days at a time away from each other. So every 7 days, Sue is up and around doing her thing. She gets the job back at the aerobics place. She's the new hot young thing. But then after 7 days, she has to switch places with Elizabeth, and she has to sleep while Elizabeth is awake going through her life. And so there's this 7-day switch off, and you start to see them collide with each other. You start to see Elizabeth get jealous of the younger, better version of herself named Sue. You start to see Sue irritated that she can't just live a normal life because she has to switch places with Elizabeth every 7 days. And all of that conflict between the two of them ultimately leads to a ton of body horror and an interesting look at how society treats women who start to get a little older and start to lose a little bit of that young attractiveness. Now that's the best synopsis that I can give you. If that sounds like an interesting concept for a film, well, you should go check this one out. It is playing in theaters now. With all that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. The first positive I have for this movie has to be the sound design. I noticed right off the bat when you see the opening scene of this film where there's an egg yolk in a pan and you see someone come in with a needle and it injects the substance into that egg yolk that then produces another egg yolk, you could just hear all of the different things that were happening in that scene, and that sound design carries through the rest of the film. Because anytime you're in one of these really grotesque, disgusting moments, you hear every little detail that's happening, and I thought that was done so damn well, and it really just helped the viewer be in the moment with those scenes. I think if the sound design hadn't been absolutely flawless, then there would have been a little bit of a disconnect where you're just, I'm just watching this nasty thing happening on the screen. But because they do such a good job with the sound design, you're hearing all this happen in the moment. You're hearing all the little things. It just fully puts you into the moment of those scenes. My next positive has to be the main cast of this film. That would be the top 3 we already talked about in Dennis Quaid, Demi Moore, and Margaret Qualley. Now, I don't know Margaret Qualley from anything. She does a great job as Sue in this film, but Demi Moore, this might be my favorite role from her, and Dennis Quaid, it might be my favorite from him. Both of them play the stereotypical producer and stars in Hollywood, where Dennis Quaid is a lot like a Harvey Weinstein type, where he's just looking at these girls as property, he's looking at these girls as a way to make money, and he's disgusting throughout. And then you've got Demi Moore's character, who's this star who's sort of fading, and so she's trying to hold on to that fame for everything that she can. She's even willing to go to these crazy lengths just to hold on to that fame. My next positive has to be the body horror in this film, and I think this is on the level of some of the Cronenberg body horror. Like if you look at a movie like The Fly and you like how that looks, you're like, oh, that's absolutely disgusting, then I think you're going to like how this movie looks, because there's some disgusting disgusting imagery in this film, but it's not going to be for everybody. Some of the imagery is going to be too much for some people. I threw it in the positives because while I typically don't like gore for the sake of gore, I thought this movie used body horror to its advantage to tell the story. And my final positive kind of goes along with that, and that is the story of this film I thought was told in a very unique way, where it shows how Hollywood sort of churns out these younger actresses, and then when they get older, they sort of push them away. But it's not just Hollywood, it's society in general. When you see Margaret Qualley's character of Sue walking down the street, everybody stops and looks at her. They can't believe what she looks like. They like what they're seeing. But then in the next 7 days, when Elizabeth Sparkle is walking down the street, you see everybody just bump into her, pass her by. They don't pay her any extra time. They're just like, ugh, that's not what I want to see in society. And so I think there's a good parallel between the two of them, and the movie does a good job showing how society treats women when they get a little older. And that'll lead over to my negatives. And my first negative for this film is that I don't think they do a great job explaining where the substance comes from. And technically you could look at this movie and say, well, you don't really need to know. These people are just taking the substance because they want to look younger. They don't care what the repercussions are. But for me personally, I would have liked a little bit more backstory on the substance itself. I would have liked to know where this came from, who's putting it out. Is it a producer in Hollywood? Like, that would have been an interesting angle if it was the machine that is Hollywood sort of putting these things out there to keep that machine running. But you don't get any backstory for the substance at all. There is, I suppose, a little bit of commentary on what the substance is or where it comes from between her and someone else in the movie who's also taken the substance, but it's so little that you don't get very much. And again, I just wish they had explored it. Now, the movie does take its full runtime to explore the situation that is Elizabeth Sparkle and Sue, but I wish they'd taken a little bit of that time and put it towards explaining where the substance came from. My next negative for this movie is that while they were telling an interesting story, they were showing the parallels between Sue and Elizabeth, and I think that worked. I did have an issue with them repeating the same beats constantly throughout the film. So you've got Sue walking around for 7 days, going to this aerobic show, becoming a star, getting more and more fame, going out with friends, coming back to her house with guys, and you've got that going on. And then on the other side, it's very depressing. You've got Elizabeth waking up and sort of hating her life. She doesn't like that, in her opinion, this other person now is living her life, even though technically they are the same person. She doesn't like that she's living that life, and so it's depressing. And the first time it happens, you're like, wow, this is a good parallel between the two of them. Wonder where they're going to go with this. And where they go with it is repeating that over and over and over throughout the film. You get 7 days of sort of bright colors and, oh my goodness, everything's great. And then you get 7 days of it's dark and this girl doesn't know what to do with herself because she's old. And basically now she just wants the other version of herself to have a good time, but she's got to be up for 7 days. And again, the first time or maybe 2 times that happens, you're like, okay, this is a very good story. I like where this is going. But they just keep repeating those beats for the entire runtime of the movie. Which leads to my final negative of this film, and that is that the movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and you guys know, anything over 90 minutes at this point, it better be worth it. There are some movies that I do think are worth it. I enjoyed Napoleon. That movie was a ridiculous amount of time. I enjoyed Killers of the Flower Moon, although I think it did drag at some places. That still had a long runtime, and I enjoyed it for the most part. But this film, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and the last 20 minutes really seemed to drag. There's a last portion of the last act of this film that just continues and continues and continues. And I think there's some things they could have cut out of this film to really shorten that down. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some great moments in that last act. There's some great body horror in that last act. And if that's what you're there for, you will enjoy what they're giving you in that last act. However, I think that there's moments throughout this film that they slow down in slow motion and take their time with, or they really want you to hear what's going on. Remember, I talked about that sound design, so they really want it to just infect your brain with the way that it sounds, that they slow things down. And all of that adds up to a 2 hour and 20 minute runtime. And again, I think you could have cut out about 20 minutes worth of content in this film and still gotten the same point across and still shown you all of that grotesque body horror that people are there for. That's not to say that this was bad in any way, shape, or form. I really enjoyed it. In fact, overall, I would highly recommend that everybody checks out The Substance, because even if you're not a huge body horror fan, I think that the story of this movie is a good one, and it's a cautionary tale while it's also being just outright disgusting at moments. So I think there's a little bit for everybody. So would I recommend this movie in a theater? If you're a body horror fan, 100% check this movie out in the theater. If you're just watching it for the story, maybe watch this one at home when it's streaming. But hey, it is the spooky month, so I assume this will be streaming at some point in October. But those are just my opinions because that's my review for The Substance. Guys, if you had a chance to see The Substance yet, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if you enjoyed it, what you enjoyed about it. Maybe we agree or disagree on some things. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions. And as always, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of The Substance movie review, and I had a good time watching this movie. I actually have plans, maybe, to go see this again with one of my older brothers, so I'm looking forward to doing that this week because this was a fun one to watch. But with that said, if you like this video and you want to watch more content on my channel, well, I've got all of my horror movie reviews right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.